Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. We've got a great episode for you. We have a gentleman, his name is Moustafa Moursy. He is the president of a company called Push Analytics, and they are process experts. Now, what are we bringing somebody on who's a process expert for? Because process lack of, or process having a well-defined, well-executed process brings you more sales. It also brings you more sanity, increases your happiness, decreases your sad days. It also decreases the frustration that happens in your organization when your process is in place. So we're going to talk about how it relates to growth of revenue. We're going to talk about it, how it relates to your people internally, and why it is a must and should be important. And by the way, process is one of the ways of gathering some of the lowest hanging revenue out there for your company that right now is untapped revenue. So without further ado, let's go speak to Moustafa. Moustafa, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks so much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Doug. Thanks for having me. So hey, everybody. So it's Moustafa here, president of pushanalytics.com. We are a full service digital consulting agency, and we help a lot with different aspects of the business. I personally have extensive B2B sales experience, and one of the things that we help a lot with that we're unique in is we help a lot with getting your processes set up properly for your business so that it's fine-tuned, fine-running, and working those processes with the technologies that you're using to enable those processes in your business and blending the two together. Whether it's a CRM, other tools that you're tying in together, we help it all.
And folks, the reason Moustafa came to this call is he has an expertise in creating business process to help you through the lead generation process, from the generation of the lead all the way through the sales, the operations, the full cycle of business, and how to increase the profitability. And I know that's important to all of you. So this is, get your notebooks out. This is going to be a class for you to take notes, I promise. So Moustafa, let's start. Why does process matter? Like, people always talk process. We all think we know, but why does it really matter in a business?
Absolutely. No, great question. So here's the thing. I mean, one thing we ask people a lot, right, is what do you think of your existing process? And now some people will be like, well, I don't have a process. Well, the thing is, that's wrong. See, every business has a process. You might just not be paying attention to it. Because the process is how you get from point A to point B. So if you're a business, you have customers, you already have a process. Now, your process might be sophisticated. Your process might be, hey, some Excel sheet, or your process might be stuff that you write on a napkin. But ultimately, it's still a process, right? And it's very important to understand this, to understand that no matter what, you have a process. So it's just whether it's optimized or not optimized is really the question that's being asked. And when you have a process that's not organized, you're like, I don't care about my process, whatever. You end up with a lot of leakage in the business overall, like on different points, right? So things fall in between the cracks, like tasks that are supposed to be assigned to somebody that nobody really does. Hey, lack of visibility on certain aspects, right? You don't have control over your inputs as well. You don't have visibility, and you don't have really like control over your outputs either as much as you would like to, and you can't understand what's happening across the business. So it's very important to pay attention to your processes across the board, and it's very critical from the customer's perspective to be able to handle more customers in an efficient way.
In leakage, I'll equate leakage, and I'd like to have your feedback on this. Like, we just had an energy audit done on our home, and they came in and they said, "Hey, You've got energy escaping out of your attic. You've got energy escaping out of your windows. You've got energy escaping out of your doorways. You've got energy, going out the foundation in these places. And they came up and then they had a formula that said, if we do these fixes, then you should get a 17% lift in your energy usage, and your bill will come down by, significantly. Your energy bills will come down. So to me, leakage equals loss of profitability in a business. How do you term?
Absolutely. That's a great example. You lose profitability, but it's also, and that's directly and indirectly, right? So, because directly in the sense that, if let's say you don't have a follow-up process for your sales pipeline, for example, and you got 100 leads on a certain time period, and you forgot to follow up with 5 of them. So those 5, one of them would have became a customer. So you just directly lost money because you did not have a process in place. Something fell between the cracks, and nobody was able to catch it until maybe 2 months later, when it's too late and the customer's already gone, bought something else. So that's one. But then there's also indirectly, because if you don't have a process, I mean, maybe your sales guys are like, no, we're good. We keep track of things in a notebook, and I do it. But the thing is, you might not be able to service as many customers with the given amount of resources that you have. So you're indirectly losing revenue, because you could have more customers for the current scale organization that you have, but because your process is not optimized, things are taking longer than they should. Yeah, they're getting done, but they're taking longer than they should. So you're losing revenue indirectly. So actually, leakage contributes to both, right? Like not having good process really contributes to both sides of it. So whether it's direct or indirect.
And it doesn't take much to really lose a lot of money, or B, not gain the revenue out of it. That's been my experience. So for example, let's say we're missing 1 sale a week or 2 sales a week, just to this leakage process, whether it's direct or indirect, right? Because it could be on both sides, as you're saying. Mm-hmm. And let's say that totals to, I don't know, $20,000 in sales for the week. Well, if we do that 50 weeks in a row, that's $1 million out the door that we didn't either bring in or we actually lost. And then if we had to make that up, we're now going to have to make up maybe 5-7 times that amount of money in sales to actually make up for the $1 million loss, or maybe even more, depending on what our numbers are. So firstly, do you agree with that analogy or disagree?
Yeah, you're right. Especially if you're doing B2B sales or any high ticket sales, it really doesn't take much. It really doesn't take much for you to lose a lot of money, right? I mean, I was talking to a customer recently. They do some very, very high ticket sales, to the tune of like hundreds of thousands. We're consulting them on something and helping re-implement the system. And we're talking about the ROI in the system. And I'm like, look, if you helped prevent or gained one more sale, what would that do? He's like, yeah, it would be totally worth it. I'm like, it's just one more sale, like a year even, right? In their case, for example. So it could be as low as like 1 sale a year, or it could be a little bit more frequent than that if you have like a more, you have more things in your pipeline, but they're smaller ticket, right? But it doesn't take much in either case for you to justify, hey, we should have a good process. And another thing on that note is, people are always looking for ways to like kind of improve their business. I think one of the if you have a business that's operating, and you have a pipeline and you already have all that, process is one of actually the lowest hanging fruits to kind of fix, because it's fully within your control, right? So if you're like, hey, we want to ramp up our ad budget or something, well, we need the algorithms, and there's this and there's that, and people can click your ad, people can not, like, all this stuff, right? I mean, obviously that's important too. We'll talk about that another time. But if you're like, hey, like, we have all this stuff, we never really looked at our process, we never looked at like getting the right tools in place for each portion of the process and how do things interplay together, that's something that's fully within your control that you can get like instant efficiency on, which can translate into very quick gains, right? So that's another cool thing about process when it comes to cleaning up your process in your business.
We're speaking with Mr. Moustafa Moursy. He is the president of Push Analytics at pushanalytics.com. We're talking about processes. And Moustafa, what hit me when you were saying what you were saying just recently was, okay, we can increase profitability, increase revenues, but we can also increase our happiness and decrease our stress at the same time by having the right process in place. And so
absolutely,
let's transition over to let's take an online path, right? And let's say we have a people coming to something and they hit our website. So from there, what's kind of the path? Like it goes from there and maybe it's a lead, and then from a lead to, would you lay it out for everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's perfect. So, yeah. So people, when we talk about process, and then people are like, all right, look, Mustafa, you've convinced me that I should probably look at this. So what do we do? There's so many things happening in the business. What do we start looking at? So what I always say is the first thing, what's the most important thing in your business, right? Usually it's your customers. I mean, for like 99.9% of businesses, unless you're like a government agency or something, right? So look at it from the perspective of the customer, and then we kind of simplify like, hey, what's important and what's not. So Doug, you said it perfectly, right? Like you have customers, they might be interested in you in some way from marketing channels, whatever the case may be. And then they, a portion of them come to your website. And then from that, a portion of them are interested. And that's kind of where it starts, where it's like, okay, those guys, we're going to call them leads, and we have a lead process that handles the leads. Right now, there could be different ways to flow that lead process, whether you want to have them book a calendar link directly, or you want to have them contact somebody and there's like automation where they get an automatic email. And then if they don't reply, then there's a task assigned to the sales rep. So that way things don't fall between the cracks. But the first part of the journey is going to be that lead process. You want to handle the leads properly, store the leads properly, make sure you follow up, make sure you don't lose anything. And that's where it starts, and it kind of goes down from there, which I can go into. But that's the beginning of your question.
So hits the lead, and then we have some type of interaction with that lead somehow, some way. And that lead either goes toward, hey, I want to have a deeper discussion, or it goes into another path of, hey, I might not be interested, or I'm not interested at this moment, or whatever it might be. So there's different places that can go, but we need processes for all that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, like if I were to show a visual here, which we do sometimes, on webinars and stuff like that, we'll show visuals on this where it's like the first process that we put up on the board is essentially the lead management process, if you will. We can put up a process board, but then after that, and that's a whole process, right? So it's like you want to make sure you follow up, you want to make sure that you got them through and talk to them. Now they might respond, you might end up talking to them, in which case it goes to process number 2 on the lead board, which is going to be the sales process now. Because okay, like we've talked to them, John was really interested, he submitted an inquiry, we got on the phone with him, looks like he's going to be a good fit, let's put him up on the deal board and let's start working the deal and working the sales pipeline that way. Or maybe it's like, hey, he said he wanted to join but he no showed. We tried to follow up, nothing, so let's put him in our like rebooking process, or like or marketing process, right? So where it's like, so that's the other process we're going to put up on the board. So you want to look at them as like different things that interplay together, right? Like the lead process is its own process that ties in with the sales process, which is its own process, but has tie-in with the marketing process, where the marketing process also has tie-in to other things, not to the sales process. So you want to look at them as like different entities. And we identified like maybe like 6 or 7 or so that we put up on our process board, like different segments of process that you should be looking at.
So, it's interesting that you brought up, all right, if it goes to the sales process, it starts that, but also you brought up the word follow-up. And I was just recently, I was on a call where there were people talking to one another about what's happening in their business. And they were talking about follow-up as being a challenge for them. And this one lady said, look, I just lost a deal. And they asked, well, why? And she said, I lost the deal because I didn't stay in touch with the person who was the buyer, but they gave me indications that they weren't ready. And so I just got busy with other stuff, and I just continued on. And 5 months later, I was like, oh, I should call them. And I called them. And then the guy said to me, well, where have you been? And she said, well, I'm sorry. And he said, okay, thanks. And she goes, well, are you still interested? And he goes, yes, we actually just signed an agreement about a week and a half ago for that particular deal. And so the facilitator on that call asked her, said, what was that worth to you? And she said it was worth $400,000 annual recurring on a 5-year term. The reason I'm bringing this story up, Mustafa, is because what you're talking about, creating process, a lot of people don't get it until they lose $2 million, right out of the gate. So, but what I loved about our initial conversations and the conversation we're having now is you're bringing forth that process you have, not you specific, well, we all have one, regardless if we're following it or not. And if we're not, we're still following a process, right? So, if it's laid out. So what can somebody do to start? And because I can only imagine there are people who are going, oh my gosh, this is me, right? What can somebody do to start the process of creating process? Like, because business owners sometimes get overwhelmed with things where, departments have different initiatives, but if they wanted to start, like, step one, what would it be?
No, absolutely. So, yeah, and by the way, that's a great example. I do want to take a pause and comment there. I mean, it's a great warning story for people that, like, hey, this stuff is very important, and you could easily lose a lot of money. And it's an unfortunate example in the sense that the person lost that much money. But I will put my sales hat on for a second just to comment on that and say, as a salesperson, again, I did B2B like enterprise level sales for a good part of the decade, and tens of millions of dollars in deals. And one thing was, as a salesperson, and this is irrespective of process, the onus of follow up is on you. It's on the salesperson, right? Now, whether we think that makes sense or not, it's just how it works in the end, right? Like, ultimately, the onus of follow up is on the salesperson, not on the customer. Customers get busy. They might need the solution. They get busy. And maybe it just would have been as simple as follow up. I mean, sometimes it's not, but maybe it would have been, right? And then you would have ended up in that situation. I was speaking consulting with somebody recently, and they went with like a software platform to redo their system, and we were helping configure their process in that platform. And there was another platform, big player, that probably would have worked better for him. And he was like telling me, like, yeah, the guy, he actually was here. He got me a good deal on the price, but you know what? He didn't follow up. I would have bought it. And I'm like, it was kind of like, very plain. I mean, I've always known that, like, following up is on the sales rep from just my experience in sales, but it was interesting to see it from where the customer is literally very explicitly spelling out, like, I would have bought this software, which, by the way, was going to be better for me, but he didn't follow up, so I just didn't buy it, and I just went with something else that's not even better for me. It doesn't make any sense, but that's exactly what happened, right? So it's like, it's a, because part of it is obviously the emotional aspect where they want to feel comfortable, they want to feel like the reps on top of it. They might have forgotten. I mean, just a lot of, people are people, right? So it was very interesting. So follow up is always on the sales, person. So now with process and tools, you can improve and basically cut the leakage and follow up, which was a lot of leakage there, right? Improve your ability to follow up by being very organized. So if you're saying, hey, where do we start process? I mean, usually from the sales perspective, some sort of like on the lead and sales side. You want to just at least tie up the things where there are certain checkpoints that you need to follow up, or a certain level of activity, or maybe that, like, hey, in my business, we got to keep check with the customer, every 2 weeks, right? We just have to call every 2 weeks to, like, reach out, right? So if you wanted to start with like one thing, I'd start with like some sort of way to get your customer into like a CRM or a tool or whatever, where, like, you're keeping track of your activities that you're calling, and every 2 weeks you have reminder tasks for yourself, or like a report or a view where you can view, hey, who do I need to call for these 2 weeks? I mean, again, there's a lot more advanced things you could do, but I'm saying if you were just like, I just need to start with one thing, I mean, I'd say follow up is a very key one.
Yeah, I agree. And 23 years ago, I had my first child, and we went on a vacation. We went to Florida. And so we flew down to Florida for a week and had a great time down there. My manager was going to cover my desk at that point and, make sure they answered all my calls and the emails that came in. They were going to look them over. I get back, my voicemail's full, and I get a call. Hey, Doug, give me a call. This is XYZ guy from XYZ company, because I don't have permission to say who they are. They're still in business. And I called and I go, hey, what's up? He goes, where have you been? I said, I've been on vacation. He goes, well, we're ready to buy. And he goes, and I go, well, okay, I'm back. I'll come over today. I'll come over, today in an hour or so. He goes, you can't. We signed with your competitor.
Oh.
Right? A 3-year deal. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Right now, back then, I remember this because back then it was a $5,000 initial commission to me. And then there were
Right.
bonuses tied to the month and all that other stuff, right? So that probably cost me. And back then, you could go on vacation for a nice vacation for $3,000 for the week.
Right.
So to go on vacation, it actually cost me twice what it would have normally cost me, plus what it cost me for vacation,
Oh
right?
man.
Then we had to put a process in because I went to the manager. I'm like, what the heck? He's like, oh, we got busy, dude, and all this other stuff. I'm like, yeah, right. Okay. So then we had to have a written process for when people go off on vacation, because if we didn't have that written process and followed that, then not only I would have lost, but other people would have lost, not the department would have lost, the company lost, all of that other stuff. I've also found, Moustafa, and I wanted to ask you this, once you get kind of the sales processes down, it kind of moves from that into operations, right? Operations has its own process. You being an enterprise level guy, and myself, I was an enterprise level guy. I remember I sold 5 deals one time, and this was back when paper was paper. And somebody had knocked my orders behind the corporate fax machine, and operations didn't pick them up. And the orders were delayed out 5 weeks. And it was killing me because one of them was Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
Oh, rough.
Yeah, and a couple other big names too, but I won't name them. But one of those orders actually that canceled,
Yeah.
and that was a $30,000 commission to me.
Yikes.
And that was a lot of money to me, especially back then, right? So here's the thing. So it goes from sales, but now we got to have a process from sales into operations, right? Because isn't there some leakage that happens between sales and operations at times?
Absolutely. So actually, you hit the nail on the head. And usually when we're presenting, I like to show the slide where I show, okay, so now we finished all these process, sales, leads, marketing, whatever. Customer became they became a customer, and I throw up a little like confetti thing and like, hey, we're done, right? It's over. And it's like, no, it's not. Big X hits on the screen. No, it's not, right? That's actually where things just begun. So that is actually one of the most common points of friction that we deal with, that we help people with all the time, and very few even understand this is a friction point. People like maybe don't necessarily look there. A lot of consultants maybe aren't necessarily thinking of that, because you have to look at really the whole end-to-end business. Like, right, you're not looking at, if somebody was trying to focus on sales, they might not think of like, all right, I'm done when sales ends. If somebody was trying to focus on operations, they might be like, well, all right, I'm focused on like getting the operations. So a lot of times you don't have somebody who's looking at like what happens exactly at that handoff point. And that's a very, very huge point of friction. So there's a lot of scenarios. I like to give the example of like, hey, let's say you're a software company, you're onboarding somebody. Once sales finishes, they're supposed to be onboarding. And let's say you don't have any organization or any structure. So, guy gets on with the onboarding rep, customer gets on, they're like, hey, sales said I got 2 free months. And then the onboarding guy's like, I don't know this. So then he stops everything, goes to hunt down sales. Sales is busy. John from sales is doing whatever. He finally gets them. John's like, I don't know, man. He looks through his notes and he kind of like does all this, and and then he's like, dude, that guy, I told him 10% off and it's already on the account. And now what happened, right? So everybody's pissed, right? The customer's pissed because he's going to hear like a day later an answer he didn't want to hear. The onboarding rep just wasted an entire day hunting down sales. The sales guy had to distract from his workflow to give information for something he already sold. Everybody's having a bad day. Everybody's pissed. You just lost how many man hours? I don't know how many man hours, like 8, 10, whatever. And multiply this by a lot. This actually happens a lot. It's actually a common type of scenario. Right. Whereas if you had a process and things were documented properly, and there was a connection, we call it separate but connected, where we want to connect the service process to the sales process, but they're still separate because they're different teams. Service doesn't need to see every single thing sales is doing, but they need to be connected so that they can refer back. So if it's let's say in your CRM or whatever, you tied the ticket down to the deal and you had like a clean note structure, but I then come back and be like on the call, be like, oh, look, I actually see the note. John put it. It's actually 10% off. It's already applied to your account. Don't worry. Customers like at least like got a quick answer, so they're not too upset. The sales guy didn't even know about it, and the onboarding rep got it done on that call without creating any like debt, essentially, right? So this is a huge thing. You can multiply this by a lot, and there's a lot of different scenarios. But that's a very, very, very big important point that I would say can save a lot of money, time, headache, very rapidly.
Mustafa, if there's a CEO of a company and they're hearing this and they're going, okay, I got leakage in my sales. I got leakage in my operations. I've probably got leakage in my customer service, which we haven't talked about yet, but we will. I've got leakage probably in my marketing side. What's the first step for them to kind of say, okay, is it to like step back and take a look at the whole organization and then see where the leakage points are, or they call you, or they do something else? What do they do?
We can consult with people like that all the time if people do want to call. But I'll tell you like what what to look at just in general, right? If you're just kind of thinking like, okay, where do I even start, right? I'm going to call somebody, whatever, but where do I even start, right? So I'm going to say it depends on like it depends on where you're at and what you're trying to do. But if you're like, hey, I need to just get I need to work on one thing, like kind of what you said earlier, then I would try to look at like something like follow up, because that might be the easiest to at least patch up. I mean, you always want to. So process is an iterative thing, by the way. I mean, you're gonna set up processes, you're gonna lay them out. They're gonna be constantly improving, and there's also like a constant training factor as well that goes into it, where you're getting buy-in from actually all the users. Which we could talk about that in a little bit. But you could start with one thing, if that's what it was. But if you're like, no, I know I need to revamp my process, I'm ready. What we would do, like let's say you were talking to us, is we actually will look, and I always tell this to clients: tell me exactly where your processes are right now. Where are you right now? And it doesn't matter, right? If it's like, yeah, we write up on a napkin the quote and give it to the customer, that's okay. I still want to know that. I want to know where are we today, right? And then we start looking at mapping out things, and we do a lot of like flow charting to be able to, uh, untangle what's happening, right? Because it's very important to like know what connects into what, and then working with the customer to like, okay, what do we want to have? Well, I'd really like it if anytime, for example, there might be anytime sales got an account that they knew that they needed to follow up every 2 weeks, and they had some sort of like way to be able to remember that, for example, right? So a CEO or a sales leader might know that, like might know what they want exactly, or maybe they know at a higher level, like, hey, I want to be able to see this, I want to be able to see this, and we can work it backwards. But it all starts with two things: what are you doing today, and just from a vision standpoint, where do you feel like you need to be? And then we sit there and fill in the blanks, and then map out process diagram, really get to the bottom of what needs to be done specifically. We go back and forth with the stakeholders, show them, and usually when people see the process in front of them coming together, things really start to click. And we were on a call with or we did like we were doing process consulting for people because we were going to implement them into a CRM. And we always do, before we touch any tools, because a big part of this is the tools you're going to use to actually execute on all this. But before we touch any tools, we map out everything and understand everything and lay it all out. And the stakeholders for that business, the executives actually message us after. They're like, thank you guys so much. You actually helped us understand our own business
Right.
better than we understood it ourselves, because they were able to see everything in front of them as it's happening, as we're making recommendations. And then they can chime in and be like, oh, okay, you're going to send a reminder here, but actually, can you do it every 2 days instead of every like 4 days? Because it's like a, quick. And then they can chime in, and then they feel like, okay, nothing is really falling between the cracks. And this is all before you even get them in any tool or anything, right? So it's a business first approach. You need to understand the business, build out things for the business, iterate, and then implement. So that's kind of the approach we take.
That's excellent advice. The follow up is one of those things. I mean, we can look up statistic after statistic. Guerrilla marketing says 86% of sales that would have happened don't because of lack of follow up. 50% of salespeople never follow up one time. Over and over and over again. And I love what you said. It's incumbent upon the salesperson actually to follow up. I also feel it's incumbent upon the salesperson to actually follow up on their operations, on their orders. And those of you who are selling, you are not paid until the money is in the bank. So, stay in touch with people through follow up on the relationship. And that way you can help out if there's any lagging payments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Speaking of service, because that's what we're talking about, you go from operations, the deal's closed, everything's good. Now it goes and they have a problem in service, let's say, or they have a service related issue. I have seen so many customer service departments not act like an additional sales team, or they're just there kind of like thinking that they're there to answer a question, but not create service. And when I look at it, from the clients that I've worked with, I think it all goes back to process. There was never any real process set out, the vision, the endpoint, benchmarks of what we're supposed to do in customer service. Do you see that as well in customer service, or do you see other things?
Yeah, I mean, we do like to tell people that customer service is actually a sales function, right? If you do it properly, right? It's a sales function. It can feed back into sales. Now, I'm not necessarily suggesting, I mean, it depends on the organization, right? There's a lot of different layouts for customer service departments. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that the customer service reps themselves, have some onus of sales on them. I'm not suggesting that. I mean, it could be depending on the org. But what I am saying is the customer service process itself, if you have it laid out properly and you're doing the right things, you can actually tie in to give signals to the salespeople, for example, where like, hey, this guy is really unhappy. By the way, good salespeople knew this, right? If somebody's unhappy in, like, let's say their customer, it could actually be a sales opportunity.
Right.
Sometimes, right? It could actually be a sales opportunity because then you come in, save the day, and they're like, you know what? Doug is excellent, excellent service, really helped me out. I don't even care. I'm going to buy from Doug. I don't even care. Like his company screwed up. I'm going to buy from Doug because he really came through for me. I remember there was one time when I was doing sales, a little bit of tangent here. I took a call. A customer called me on Saturday, which, I mean, it was no big deal. I worked whenever anyways, but customer called me on Saturday. I took a call. He had a question. He needed help with something. I helped him, and I don't even think I gave him like details. There's maybe something we need to go back to the factory for or something like that. Like it's not like I have the full answer, but I did, speak to him for maybe 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. Since that time, that customer, until even after I left the role, would ask about me just to be able to like, yeah, I want to buy from this guy because,
Right.
because he just remembered that like, hey, this guy was really helpful and helped me on the weekend, even though I felt like I didn't even give you the full answer. I'm like, I just took a call, like really. But in his mind, he really needed to talk to somebody at that moment and needed the service. And he felt like he got it. And he's like, you know what? I want to work with this guy. And it was a huge customer, like to the tune of millions. I want to work with these guys because they're helpful, right? So with the service side, you want to see where that lays out. You want to have a good service process, but you want to also identify like key opportunities where you can kind of flag the sales function, or if your service team does, again, some service teams do upsells and stuff like that, but you want to flag key opportunities where like, hey, surveys, this customer is really happy. They're actually saying great things about us. They just filled out a survey and gave us like, we're off the charts on net promoter score, with their survey. Hey, let's contact them and see if they'd want to do like a partnership, or they want to recommend us, or they want to put up a review, or they want to do whatever, right? So you really wanted the service part to tie in to sales as much as possible. And this is where, taking a step back, where I was saying laying out everything and diagramming it and showing how things interface with each other is very key, because you're not going to really be able to do this that easily if you can't see things in front of you abstracted, right? If you can't see that, like, okay, when does service even kick in for our particular business, right? Well, we have software. So after they buy the software, they turn to onboarding. So they're still not really getting service. And then there's a month onboarding period. And then after that, they might call service for different issues. And then, okay, what are the types of things they call service for? Maybe like technical issues, dashboard, but maybe they call for features. Then you kind of start seeing, then you'd be like, okay, the people that are calling for features, we should notify sales because we have a lot of extra packages for features that they can buy, for example, right? But you're not going to know this. And it's going to be very specific to each business. You're not going to know it unless you're actually laying things out and looking at the full picture combined. That's what's very key here.
That makes a ton of sense, because they may call into customer service before they even get onboarded. And they start inquiring about features like, hey, I was looking at, I know I've done this, right? I've bought some software. I'm like, geez, I wonder if they have an add-on that will do this. And I've called in and the customer service department was never referred me back to sales, number one, and somewhat a little bit clueless on the last one I called. But I also have called, who I think does a great job at this, and I'll give them a plug on this, is GoDaddy. If you've ever worked with GoDaddy ever, and you call into their customer service line, you are going to buy something by the time you leave that call. There's no because they just have it down. They just have that process down. And if the process is something they can't handle, they have a resource that they can send you to immediately, or let's say they're coming back in, they make sure that the call actually happens at that time. So they'll set the call up so you don't have to like call back in and just, start all over again. So, but I think what you said is just so key. You want to map out the whole playing field ahead of time so you can see and head off. Okay, this is what's happening. Now, I have a question on that. Is it advisable to talk to our current clients, our current potential buyers, and ask them what is service to them? What is the value perception of service to them? Will that give us ideas as well?
So you're saying, whatever business, whatever clients you have, ask them what they expect to get out of customer service when they call.
Correct. Yeah. What is their expectations of what is really great service or customer service? Because what I found with a lot of customer service is they don't realize that service, is not just there to like mitigate problems, right? Service can be there, as you said, it could be part of the sales process. But many companies I have found with service, they don't even look at what's the value perception from the client's perspective of what they're looking for out of service. And so therefore they don't deliver that at value expectation. So they're missing on the upsells, the cross sells, the even some of the remarketing and retention, which we're going to talk about. That's what I have found. And again, I'm you're the expert in this, so I'm bringing it out, to you.
Yeah, for sure. A big part of service is you want to make sure you're getting some feedback from customers and using that feedback in some way. Don't just ask people to fill out surveys and then just throw them in a trash bin somewhere, right? Like actually do something with the surveys or whatever it is. And don't make really long surveys either. Nobody really likes to fill those out necessarily anymore.
Right.
Maybe except in some cases. But one thing, yes, I mean you should definitely interface with the customer and understand what they're looking. I would phrase the question in a specific way though, like right, if I was like right, I know, like for example, if I had called one of my colleagues, hey, what do you expect to get in service? They're gonna just give me everything, right? Which is like maybe like that's not something, setting a false expectation that like we can do everything under the sun, with our service department, which is not true, right? But it's like maybe asking like, hey, when was the time you had a good customer service interaction, right? Like that's a more like with our company or competitor, for example, right? If I was talking to a customer, because then they're either giving me something that's like grounded in some sort of reality, right? Like, oh, your competitor really picked up the phone and maybe it was another domain company and maybe they asked you, Doug, and you're like, you know what? GoDaddy really did a great job. When I needed help, they, brought me into the right person at the right time, to a sales meeting, and they did a great job, and I was able to get something out of that. For example, another company that does well with this is HubSpot. We're HubSpot partners, we're platinum partners. A lot of times we do use HubSpot as a CRM to lay out a lot of these processes, which is very good with. But anyways, HubSpot does a really good job with that, where they same thing. You might be talking to support, and they'll answer your questions, but then they'll be like, I think you actually need to talk to sales, and then they'll just kind of refer you over, right? So that could be an example of like a good experience that somebody gives you that's like very actionable. So that's one. But the other thing is I would leverage the reps too, right? So always, anytime when we're doing some sort of consult that involves revamping support or fixing up the support process, we always want to bring in somebody from the customer rep team, whether it's service manager, inside sales, like if it's sales department, inside manager, like of support manager, whatever, right? We want to bring in whoever is like actually taking the calls, somebody that has that visibility, and to like, look, what kind of calls are you guys getting? Like, what are the categories? Like, we always actually, one of the things that we want to categorize the types of support calls we get, because that really helps drive like what's important, what's not. I mean, for example, we've done work with like property management companies, and it's like, okay, let's what are the type of, why do people call in? And we separate like, why do the guests call in? Why do the hosts call in, right? And like, what are the different reasons that they might call in? Oh, I'm locked out of the house. Oh, the bathroom's not working. Oh, this, oh, that. And we kind of categorize them in. And first of all, we see like, what are some of the things that we can just eliminate by having, after a while, right? That's why it's iterative. So you have this, now you're tracking it. Maybe it's 6 months later, you're like, okay, there's been like, I don't know, 35% of our support tickets are people calling in because they're locked out of the house. We need better lock boxes, for example, right? It's like a dumb thing to fix. And it would save us a lot of calls, a lot of money, and the customers would have a much better experience. But we just didn't know it was an issue until now. So now we know. So now let's fix it, right? So like there's like easy opportunities that way. But then also you kind of start seeing from there where that leads you. Okay, hey, a lot of people are calling in asking when they can stay again, for example, right? It's like, okay, we need a process to upsell them. I stayed at a vacation Airbnb whatever a couple years ago. It's in the summer and what they did was cool. It wasn't actually Airbnb. I'm just saying it's a rental like Airbnb. It's a different private company. And what they did was I thought was really cool is after you finish your stay, like a few days later, they actually send you an email saying, "Hey, since you stayed and since you probably liked it, would you want to book and reserve the same exact week next summer?" Right? It's like a really cool thing, right? It's like, and again, that's probably something they figured based on what their customers asking, or based on request, or by analyzing, or they came up with it proactively. But you can leverage this, you know, if you're already cleaning up your processes and you already have a service team, you can leverage the knowledge that's already in people's heads to get like a head start with initial hypothesis.
Yeah, and that goes into the remarketing and retention component of the whole process that, that happens, during and after the sale.
Absolutely.
It's a very smart thing. Moustafa, I imagine people here going, okay, Doug, how do I get a hold of this guy? Stop talking to him and let me get it. If they want to reach out to you directly, or they want to, know more about the company or anything like that, what would you recommend?
Okay, so we're gonna actually put up an offer here where we have a process guide like PDF. I mentioned a lot of those processes we're going to put up on the board. We put up on the process board. So we're actually put out a PDF guide that everybody can get access to from this call. So I would go to pushanalytics.com/process guide. And then you can put your info, you can get the guide, and you'll get an email to be able to schedule a call with us for a free consult as well after you get the guide. So pushanalytics.com/process guide.
Okay, we'll put that into the show notes. And if they wanted to reach out to someone directly, do they just go to pushanalytics.com and then go to the contact form, or how do they?
Yeah, they could do that as well. And I can actually, it's going to be too long for me to say, but I can actually give you, if people didn't even want to go to the guide, I can give you a link, and we can put it in the show notes as well, specific for the show. So if somebody listening to the show, they really want to talk about something that we've heard today, we're happy to do like a 20-minute consult and talk about whatever they want on their business, and either give them good insight or see how we can help.
Awesome. Moustafa, thanks for being on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast today. Thanks for bringing your A game. I really appreciate this.
You got it.
And I'd like to have you back on down the line if you're up for it.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
You either have a process or you don't. And if you don't, you still have a process. Isn't that a cool idea? Whether you have one or not, you still have one. So you absolutely have one, right? So the question is it optimized or not optimized for you? And the cool part is it's not that hard or difficult to optimize a process. But as Moustafa said, you want to look at the whole overall picture and how the processes interrelate to one another, because you could change one process in one department, for example, and it causes a hardship in another department. So look at the overall processes in your company and make that a sticking point for you to do in this year. Even if you start slow and you start just, creating a little bit of process, you have a meeting, right? You said, they call it the 3 Ps, if you will, in the world of business, planning, procedures, and policies, that you're creating out of process. That is a place to start. But again, look at the overarching, absolutely wise advice he gave you in that capacity. If you loved this episode, as always, would you please give it a 5-star review? Don't forget to download the guide that Moustafa is putting out. It is in the show notes. And if you are an expert yourself, or someone who's an expert and you're like, man, I want to hear a subject matter on this particular, topic, and somebody, introduce them to us. If it's yourself, send it in yourself. And you send it into YouMatter, YOUMATTER, at ceosalesstrategies.com. If yourself is looking to get in the top 1% of sales earners, or someone they're looking to get there, or maybe you're like a little confused about where to go with your sales in general, or they're just not working out as you wanted to, reach out to me directly. If you are interested in our sales university and you want to be on the mailing list, let us know. Also, we are coming out with our SaaS product, our automated follow-up. and automated prospecting system to help you convert more sales. If you want to be on that waiting list, let me know that as well. Just send me an email at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. And just a little forward thought here. I am coming out with an ebook on how to be in the top 1%. If you're interested in that, email me directly as well. Until next time, go out and sell something. Sell a lot of it. Play win-win. That means you win, they win. You help them, they give you a payment. They're happy, you're happy, everybody's happy. That's the way to play life in general, but certainly playing it in sales will get you more referrals, more repeat business, and much happier days. We'll see you next time on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks for being here today. This is Doug Brown saying, to your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.